Happy Monday. Time to pass the time. We got a month, almost exactly a month until 49ers training camp starts on July 29th. It is June 27th, and that means that we're officially in late June, and that means that we're about to turn the calendar to July. And if you remember from way back in February and March, that NFL Combine time, when Jimmy Garoppolo initially underwent shoulder surgery, the hope and the timeline was that he'd be able to throw again by late June or early July. Well, we're firmly in that time frame now, which means that we're coming up on a clean bill of health for Jimmy Garoppolo. And all reports since that surgery back in March have indicated that Garoppolo is indeed progressing along the original timeline. So that means that this right here, the ability to throw is necessary for a trade market to heat up, but so is a potential suitor. But that first part of it, the ability to throw, well, if Jimmy Garoppolo can pass a physical, can demonstrate that he could still throw the football with some zip, still has that quick release, well, that's the first prerequisite for us to finally start talking Jimmy Garoppolo trade again. So that's the theme of this video today. Welcome everybody to the channel. If you're new here, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm bridging the gap of this 49ers offseason. We're now in the dead period. I was a tight end you last week. That helped make this dead period about a week shorter, but it's still going to be a long one. This is always that time of the year that the NFL doesn't quite dominate, right? The NFL has figured out a way to dominate 11 out of 12 months, maybe 11.5 out of 12. But that last half month leading up to the pre-training camp anticipation, essentially this couple week window is where there's probably not going to be a whole lot of new content, but it just so happens to be that Jimmy Garoppolo is scheduled to start throwing again, to be healthy again during this period, so we can restart those Jimmy Garoppolo trade discussions. We can start talking about what the 49ers might want to do moving forward. So this is, I think, what we know clearly. And I know that the national media, I know some of Twitter tries to muddle what I think is very apparent, and that is that the 49ers want Trey Lance to be their starting quarterback and are planning on Trey Lance to be their starting quarterback in the 2022 season. Simultaneously, they are planning to somehow jettison Jimmy Garoppolo, if they so can, for a fair price ahead of this 2022 season. The original plan was to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, no questions asked, earlier in this offseason. However, he did undergo the shoulder surgery. We do know that Jimmy Garoppolo played through two injuries during the 2021 season, especially down the stretch. He was hurt because it was both the thumb, the kind of the thumb finger, whatever it was, torn ligament down there, and the shoulder injury. Those injuries ended up persisting, obviously, through the end of the season. The thumb injury eventually healed on its own, but the shoulder injury didn't quite heal. Surgery became an option when rehab wouldn't take for Jimmy Garoppolo. And around the time of the NFL Combine, he decided that he would indeed go under the knife. And that came just as the 49ers and potential trade talks with other teams were heating up. So nobody wants to trade for a quarterback who can't throw a football, especially one like Garoppolo, who has had his share of injury issues in the past. That put a lot of stuff on ice. Garoppolo himself, even not considering the injury, was probably going to be behind somebody like Deshaun Watson, who, at the time actually is now embroiled in much more controversy, right? Since potential NFL discipline is possible, since that New York Times article has come out, as we get a look to see, what potential actions may happen there for the league. But in the case of Deshaun Watson, remember back in March, we were saying, oh, wait, Deshaun Watson's going to have to be traded first. Then the Jimmy Garoppolo domino might happen. Well, we may be waiting for other Deshaun Watson news before something along the lines of Jimmy Garoppolo might happen now. But he was always in line and not at the front of the line several months ago, Garoppolo was. And he got pushed to the very bottom of the line, probably pushed to trade market inactivity due to the shoulder injury. So now that he might finally be healthy again, we're going to see that here in the next couple of weeks. We're going to see Jimmy Garoppolo get back in line, and I'm sure Baker Mayfield's in that line as well. And it's all been complicated by the Deshaun Watson situation and possible suspension in Cleveland. So it's again going to be something complex as we talk about the potential destinations for Jimmy Garoppolo and the potential machinations that may await the 49ers moving forward. But what we do know is that Carolina has over $25 million in cap space. and a potential need for a new quarterback. They have Sam Darnold as their projected starter under contract. But what I can tell you about the Panthers is that Matt Rule and that staff, they're probably on the hot seat, right? They haven't won a lot in 2 seasons. They need to win this year. And unless you think that Sam Darnold is going to be a surefire ticket to getting you to win games, they might be looking for an upgrade. We also look at the fact that, though Carolina has $25 million in cap space, Jimmy Garoppolo, as it stands right now, wouldn't come cheap on his current contract. He has 1 year left on his deal here for the 2022 season, and he's owed $24.2 million of base salary for this season. But that is not a guaranteed amount of money. No team is obligated to pay that until if and when Garoppolo makes the 53-man roster. So he'd have to make the 49ers 53-man roster, something that cannot possibly happen until either August 31st or September 1st, depending on what the cutdown day is after the preseason. He'd have to make that roster to be fully entitled to that money. As things stand right now, Jimmy Garoppolo is not guaranteed any of his 2022 salary. So that gives the 49ers some negotiating room here, or gives a potential trade suitor some negotiating room, because you might want to lower that 2022 cap hit if you're a team like Carolina, who has $25 million or a little bit over in cap space, but Garoppolo would cost most of that. And if you want to lower that cap hit, well, you probably do it through an extension that gives Garoppolo some more guaranteed money than he has right now, which is nothing, but also gives him more money over and more years over the length of the deal. But the $24.2 million number is really important to remember, because while it might seem that the contract is bulky, it actually is in its current iteration, but it is also potentially flexible due to the fact that none of that money is guaranteed. Also, that 53-man roster trigger gives us a date, a soft deadline date to operate with in these discussions, because that's the date that the 49ers will be working with as far as the soft deadline goes, because that's when the cap space that is dedicated to Jimmy Garoppolo right now would become unsalvageable, right? If he is on that roster week 1, if he does make the initial 53-man roster and the $24.2 million is guaranteed, well, then the 49ers can't really free that money up unless they trade Jimmy Garoppolo midseason, at which point they'd free it up at a prorated amount. So then they would formally be on the hot seat, because remember, cap space carries over if you don't use it from year to year. They'd be on the real hot seat there to try to trade Garoppolo lest they lose the money. Right now, a release technically is still possible, and that could save the 49ers all that money. So this is why I've been talking about that 53-man roster cut down date as an inflection point. And, people are freaking out about this, but the 49ers don't have to make a move until that time comes. So if there is no trade market for Jimmy Garoppolo due to the shoulder, due to the fact that nobody needs a quarterback between now and August 31st, it doesn't really hurt the 49ers to keep him, and they could still wait for that market to potentially materialize through outside avenues. So just because there has been inaction on this front doesn't mean that the 49ers are hurting themselves. They don't really start putting themselves at risk of self-endangerment financially until if and when Garoppolo makes the 53-man roster. And what is it right now, June 27th? That can't even happen for 2+ months from this point. How about the Browns? That's another big question regarding the potential Jimmy Garoppolo trade discussions, because the Browns are in the biggest mess of all right now, right? We don't know if Deshaun Watson will be suspended, and if he is suspended, we're not sure how long that's going to be. The Browns probably don't know either. And then they have a disgruntled former starting quarterback still on their roster in Baker Mayfield, and Baker's owed $18.8 million, and that's fully guaranteed this season. So while Jimmy Garoppolo has a $24.2 million base salary for 2022, Baker Mayfield also has a year left on his deal, but it's really, really different in Mayfield's case, because Garoppolo's isn't guaranteed until if and when he makes the 53-man roster as a vested veteran. Baker Mayfield has that $18.8 million as a 5th-year option price, guaranteed no matter what. So the Browns are right now in a position that the 49ers would be in, at least partially. Obviously, the 49ers don't have a Deshaun Watson on their team. But if the 49ers keep Garoppolo on their 53-man roster and that money becomes guaranteed, that's essentially where the Browns are right now with Baker Mayfield. Regardless of whether or not he makes the 53, Mayfield is owed the $18.8 million. He's obviously not happy with this situation because the Browns have moved to replace him with Deshaun Watson. But the Browns obviously can't be thrilled with the Deshaun Watson situation either, since it's possible that the NFL suspends him. So that leaves a potential vacuum in Cleveland, right? If Mayfield doesn't want to play for them, or if Mayfield's unhappy playing for them, that's probably just as bad. And if Watson is suspended and unable to play, well, in that situation, you would need somebody to fill that vacuum with the Cleveland Browns. And they have over $42 million in cap space, a number that could potentially grow if Deshaun Watson is indeed suspended because of deferred salary from this 2022 season to 2023. So they have plenty of money to fit this $24.2 million. But they also have Baker Mayfield and his $18.8 million guaranteed in 2022. So that's why you see all this wild talk about a potential three-way trade involving Carolina, involving Cleveland, and involving the 49ers. And you also have all this talk about Deshaun Watson. And that's the question I brought up earlier. Are we again waiting for the Deshaun Watson news to clear the way for movement on the Garoppolo front? Back in March, it was like, oh, wait, when will Watson be traded? That domino is going to have to go first. Watson did get traded, but it turns out that the musical chair stopped at that point because there wasn't enough interest from any of the remaining teams like Carolina to overcome the fact that Garoppolo couldn't throw a football. Well, now we might have to wait for some Deshaun Watson news because the Browns are probably waiting for it to determine what to do at the quarterback position, right? So as the market currently stands, Carolina might be a team interested in Jimmy. Cleveland potentially could be this wild situation in which they could use Jimmy Garoppolo. But again, we're in a holding pattern right now because that Deshaun Watson news still hasn't come. Okay, so this is, I think, the big overarching picture that we have to remember. And this is the final thing I'm going to say before taking a few questions. Remember that time tends to crystallize options in situations like this one. So what is true of the league and the trade market and all those dynamics today at the quarterback position might not be true in a week and likely won't be true in a month and especially likely won't be true in about 2 months. Training camp is going to happen. Football is a violent, physical sport. Guys are going to get hurt. Guys are going to disappoint at that quarterback position. And teams might have a need for a quarterback that they don't currently have as we speak on June 27th. And that's why buying time, especially when it doesn't hurt the 49ers, when Garoppolo's money is not guaranteed to him until he makes the roster, if and when he does do that, that's why buying time is a valuable strategy for the 49ers. And it's something that they obviously have to do right now because Garoppolo, as we speak on June 27th, can't throw. But once Jimmy is able to throw, assuming he does pass a physical and everything is okay and teams can start getting interested again, the 49ers can still bide their time because options like this will crystallize over time. We might see somebody get hurt. So say Jared Goff gets hurt in Detroit, or go to the AFC. Another quarterback may become unavailable. Somebody can be arrested. Who knows? The future is unwritten. It's the NFL. It seems that it gets wilder and wilder with each passing year as far as these offseason transactions go. Well, as the quarterback market shifts, as those parameters change, there might be another team that has to throw its name into the ring for a player like Jimmy Garoppolo. As it stands right now, Mayfield presumably available, Garoppolo presumably available, but the events in Cleveland with Deshaun Watson make everything a whole lot more complicated. So we look at Cleveland as a potential quarterback, a team that's looking for a quarterback, a potential quarterback searcher, and we look at a team like Carolina as a team that might be interested in a QB like Garoppolo. From there on, we just have to sit back and wait to see how that market's going to materialize. And we could speculate until the cows come home. But the 49ers want a bigger market so they can obviously get as much of a return as possible. And the 49ers also obviously, I think, want Trey Lance to be their starter here in the 2022 season. All right, so let's open it up to some questions. I'll put this one back up on the screen. We coming up on a clean bill of health for Jimmy Garoppolo. That's why this is going to be back in the news shortly. And why don't we go through some of these questions? Again, if you're just coming in, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's talk. David, what do you see as the best and worst scenarios in your opinion? Well, from the 49ers perspective, the worst case scenario is that the market just remains at a total standstill, that Cleveland decides to roll with Deshaun Watson, regardless of whether or not he's suspended, and that Carolina somehow finds a way to trade for Baker Mayfield, talk down his salary, and then nobody else gets hurt around the league, so the quarterback market and the musical chairs completely stop with nowhere for Jimmy Garoppolo to sit. And in that situation, the 49ers will have a major decision to make. They'll have Jimmy on the roster. They don't want to give him up for nothing. And they'll have a choice. Well, do we carry him on the 53-man roster since we want to recoup some of our value here? And obviously there is value in having a good quarterback on the roster, even if you're trying to start Trey Lance. And in that case, well, it wouldn't be an ideal scenario for the 49ers, but they would have to decide, hey, is it worth carrying Garoppolo to buy more time, even though we are now committed to that $24.2 million? And if we buy more time, maybe a quarterback need around the league will arise at some point before the trade deadline, right? Weeks 1 to 7 to 8. And if that does happen and the 49ers do trade Garoppolo, say in week 5, well, then the remaining, 13 weeks of the schedule, the remaining 13 weeks of the schedule would be prorated, and any team trading for Garoppolo would pick up his salary from then. But I would have to say the worst case scenario, well, there could be a worst case scenario. It could be Garoppolo showing up to training camp and getting hurt and then leaving the 49ers completely stuck, right? So, but if we're not going to toss injuries into this, I think the worst case scenario is no trade suitor truly emerging for Jimmy Garoppolo, even after he gets healthy, just because of the nature and unpredictability of all of this. And that might leave the 49ers in a situation where they have to decide whether to release him or to carry him on that initial 53-man roster. And that would open up a whole decision tree for the 49ers moving forward. Jason Mishler, I'm coming pretty late. What kind of repercussions would the 49ers see if they cut Jimmy Garoppolo outright? He's not saying it's the best avenue, but he's just curious. Well, there wouldn't really be too many repercussions. There would be, $2.4 million in dead money. That would just be the portion of the signing bonus that Garoppolo inked in 2018 that hasn't yet hit the salary cap. But again, Garoppolo right now is not owed any money, any of his $24.2 million of base salary in 2022. He will not be owed that until if and when he makes the 53-man roster, and that can't happen for about another 2 months. So the downside of cutting Garoppolo now would be that you do not present yourself the opportunity to pounce on a market advantage trade-wise if one does present itself. Again, somebody can get hurt, somebody can get arrested, something around the league can happen that creates a demand for Jimmy Garoppolo, the same one that the 49ers probably expected might have been there a little bit earlier this offseason before the shoulder surgery, right? So by buying time, it's like a no downside thing for the 49ers right now. The downside doesn't present itself until if and when they decide to keep him to be on that 53-man roster, because then they are pledged to that money and they would only be able to recoup it if they did in fact trade him. So right now they can still cut him at no financial cost, but they do lose the opportunity cost of potentially being able to get some trade value in return. But, come August 31st, September 1st, if Garoppolo makes the 53-man roster, that's when the 49ers options do shrink a little bit. All right, I'm going to scroll up to the top to answer some of the questions that came a little sooner since I haven't seen any of these yet. So thank you, everybody, for pouring in the questions. We'll try to be online here for a little bit today. Once again, I was at Tight End U last week. I'll pop up that article here in a second for you so you can go ahead and check it out if you haven't yet. But we'll wait till a few more people sign on and we'll answer some Jimmy Garoppolo questions. All right, guys, let's see. Jimmy Garoppolo gives the 49ers the best chance to win. I mean, it is possible, but at some point the 49ers have to turn the page, right, to Trey Lance. He's got to play to get better. I agree with the whole let's shepherd the really raw quarterback along for a period of time, which was a year last year. But if he's just going to sit out on the bench for all too long, then you'll never see what Trey Lance has. And the truth of the matter is the 49ers invested a whole hell of a lot into Trey Lance because they thought that physical upside could give Kyle Shanahan's offense a new dimension. And they also obviously thought that the availability was a concern for Jimmy Garoppolo over the course of many of the past few seasons. So in a vacuum right now, if there were a game on Sunday, would Jimmy Garoppolo give the 49ers the best chance to win? Very possibly that would be the case. I mean, he gave him the best chance to win throughout all of last season. And that's why he was the quarterback for the 49ers when he was healthy throughout all of last season. But we have to view things in a bigger picture here. And the bigger picture dictates that the 49ers have invested a ton in Trey Lance and they want to raise that ceiling of the offense even further, even if it means a little bit more volatility at the start. And there's going to be some volatility with Trey Lance. And that's why it's so important that the 49ers establish the pieces around him, offensive line, receivers, tight ends, running backs, hell, even the defense, establish the pieces around him to optimize his success. Niner by nature says the opposite. Trey Lance gives the 49ers the best chance to win. Again, at this point, we don't know. We haven't even had training camp yet. But I would, it was, this debate, Jimmy Garoppolo versus Trey Lance, that was very 2021. That was a debate that was going to happen when the 49ers truly wanted to have both of these guys on the roster. I think it's really clear they don't truly want to have both of these guys on the roster. So instead of vacillating between Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance, we need to be talking about what the best business practices for the 49ers will be, given the unusual business dynamics of a potential Jimmy Garoppolo trade are. Steelers still want to trade for Jimmy. We don't know who wants to and who doesn't want to, because these teams aren't going to broadcast this information. But yes, I mean, the Steelers, they do have a rookie right on the contract and Kenny Pickett, but they also have Mitch Trubisky. And I think Pickett was only taken third-team snaps, if I read correctly today, at OTAs. So that's a situation where he's not going to be starting unless there's a complete emergency in 2022. And Mitch Trubisky, I think, is definitely not the quarterback that Jimmy Garoppolo is. So once Garoppolo is able to start throwing, I know Trubisky's got a few million guaranteed. Does Pittsburgh want to go short-term upgrade? Maybe. And hey, that's one of the variables I talked about earlier. More time will open up potentially, potentially, whatever word you want to use to qualify it, but more time will theoretically open up more options for the 49ers on the Jimmy Garoppolo trade market, and maybe Pittsburgh is on one of them. Steve Cass, Jimmy to the Browns for 6th-round pick, providing he passes a physical. Browns win a Super Bowl, and can throw a deep ball. How ironic. Well, he can throw a deep ball. He just didn't throw it a lot with the 49ers. He hit a nice one in the NFC Championship game. They hit one to Brandon Ayuk there down the sideline in the first half. Well, obviously not his strong suit. The release is Garoppolo's strong suit. So you talk about the Browns and Stefanski's offense and some of the similarities that it might have to the 49ers offense. That's why you can never rule that situation out. I talked about time to throw in a video last week, and Trey Lance having the longest time to throw from snap to release last year. Jimmy Garoppolo being one of the top 5 or 6 quickest snap to release times last year. I mean, almost all of that's by design, right? 49ers yak-based offense, get the ball out quickly, accentuate Garoppolo's strength of the quick release. I think the 49ers believe that because, he has been an effective executor of that type of offense, because he has won so many games, because he's been so efficient in that position, despite some of the interceptions, I think they believe that if he is healthy and if the market does open up, if they give it time to do that, they can recoup some significant value for Jimmy Garoppolo. It'll be probably more than a 6th-round pick, right? Who knows what that market is going to be, but the 49ers are sitting back buying time in the pocket right now to see what exactly they can get. And just off the, my gut feeling, I don't think that a 6th-round pick is going to be enough for them to move off of their position right now, since they have nothing to lose by keeping Jimmy Garoppolo for the time being. Now, if the rest of that happens, if there's some kind of 3-way trade, Baker leaves the Browns, Watson suspended, and Jimmy's there as a 1-year guy while Watson's suspended, and he wins a Super Bowl, I guarantee you that all of these apps, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, everything would absolutely burn down in 49ers social media land. All right, I know there's going to be a lot of arguing here. So it's tough for me kind of going through all these comments to actually find questions. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. If you guys have questions, put a couple of question marks on them so I can differentiate between all this infighting. Do you believe the 49ers organization still has faith in their comments earlier this offseason about their procedures with Jimmy? So about the surgical procedures or about the 49ers? I think you're asking, do the 49ers still believe they handled the process with Jimmy as well as possible? I don't see how else they could have rationally handled the process. There's a lot of hand-wringing on Twitter, but again, the 49ers stand to lose nothing while keeping Jimmy Garoppolo over the course of this offseason. The only way that they would have stood to lose something is if Keeping Jimmy Garoppolo throughout the offseason prevented them from signing a free agent or free agents they wanted to get. And that simply wasn't the case. The guy they wanted to get was Charvarius Ward, and then they wanted to sign a bunch of B-list special teams guys who they believe will make that unit better. And they were able to sign all those players. If the 49ers had wanted to sign another A-list free agent, they very easily could have restructured somebody else's contract and executed a backloaded deal. But as we've heard time and time again, as we've studied time and time again over the course of many 49ers off seasons, they've been big spenders over recent years. And this year wasn't a big spending year in that regard. Charvarius Ward was going to be the big ticket item for the 49ers. So keeping Jimmy Garoppolo didn't cost them then, and it really won't cost them until if and when he makes the 53-man roster, if it does cost them then. So there's this false kind of straw man argument, I guess I could put it as, saying that keeping Jimmy Garoppolo is somehow hurting the 49ers, when, again, it's just a business move. You don't let go of a potential asset in any trade negotiation until that asset becomes a liability. And at this point, Jimmy Garoppolo has not yet become a liability because none of that $24.2 million base salary for the 2022 season is guaranteed. Who do you believe starts at guard? Well, I think that you're going to see Laken Tomlinson's old spot taken by Aaron Banks at left guard. And I think the 49ers would like to see Jalen Moore push Daniel Brunskill at right guard to move Brunskill back into a utility role. Brunskill's still the favorite, but in an ideal world, Banks at left guard, Jalen Moore at right guard. That means that both young players have really performed well over the course of this offseason. Why do the 49ers have to keep Jimmy when Kansas City didn't keep Alex Smith? I don't know if this is part of an ongoing debate in the chat section, but to answer your question, just to play devil's advocate, situations might be different. Patrick Mahomes might be further along than Trey Lance. But I could tell by your question, some of the other ones here that you really like Trey Lance. So do I. And I wouldn't worry. I think the 49ers are big fans of Trey. They like how he's developed so far. And they're also realistic. They're also sitting back and saying, we don't know how this is going to turn out, but we have high hopes for this guy. And we're going to take that risk. We're going to roll the dice and we're going to wait and see. We're going to look and see what's going to happen with Trey moving forward. All right, scroll up. There is a super chat. Thank you to Chris. Pats cut Cam to support Mac Jones. 49ers need to be willing to follow suit to allow Lance to grow and develop without the Jimmy stands on his back. To be honest, playing quarterback in the National Football League, you're going to get a lot of flack from random people from everywhere. It doesn't matter if Jimmy Garoppolo's on the roster or not. Steve Young and Joe Montana were both on the same roster with the 49ers. And as much as it might have tortured both of them, it got the best football out of both of them. The Patriots cut Cam Newton not to support Mac Jones. They cut Cam Newton because Mac Jones is better than Cam Newton. Cam Newton can barely throw an accurate football these days. Can he throw an accurate football these days? I think the injuries caught up to Cam Newton, right? The injuries, he's a shell of his former self. So when it became really clear throughout training camp in New England last year that Mac Jones was the guy, he was completing a lot of passes, he was fitting in that system, that he was going to give them a better chance to win than Cam Newton, then of course you cut Cam Newton. Does that somehow support Mac Jones? I don't think so, because Cam Newton was going to beat out Mac Jones. Mac Jones had already beat him out. Mac Jones was already the better option. Trey Lance last year did not beat out Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, the 49ers didn't expect him to beat out Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo was supposed to be the starter for 2021, and the goal and the plan was for Jimmy Garoppolo to be gone by 2022 so Trey Lance could take over. The issue now is they haven't yet been able to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. But again, we're looking at this from the wrong lens. The 49ers have already said they expect to trade Jimmy. They've gone out and they said that. They've all but said that Trey Lance is going to be the starter. They've repeatedly called him their guy. He's gotten plenty of support from the organization. And having Jimmy Garoppolo was one of the guys that was supporting him last year, by the way. So there's nothing undermining about Jimmy Garoppolo's presence to Trey Lance. The plan all along has been to get Trey Lance to start here in this 2022 season. This is now a matter of business and what the 49ers can recoup from Jimmy Garoppolo moving forward. Looking for some more questions. Do you believe the most important part of the team is the O-line coming together? That's one of the most important things. I mean, the beauty about football is that you're going to have so many pieces, so many moving parts and dynamics across the whole roster, so many levers to pull and buttons to press. And if they all come together, you have a chance of winning a Super Bowl. You have a chance of going on a playoff run and doing something special. So it's so hard to single out any particular position or position group. But if you did have to single one out, that offensive line is so big because we all know quarterback is the most important spot on the field. Quarterback needs help, and probably the spot that can help him the most, especially if he's a young QB, is the offensive line. And the 49ers along that offensive line have a lot of questions this year. So I do think that the O-line coming together is going to be really important. Aaron Banks at left guard, Brunskill, Jalen Moore, right guard. Where will McGlinchey be coming off of the quad tear from last season? Those are all huge, huge questions for the 49ers entering this 2022 year. And as we talk about Trey Lance and how he's going to look, well, a lot of that's going to be dependent on how that offensive line looks in front of him. This is a good question. What's holding up the D Ford release? It's mysterious to me. I mean, there could still be a glimmer of hope that the guy will roar into form because at this point, it's after June 1st, and the 49ers can save a little bit of money if they do release D Ford. So if, maybe right now at this moment, they don't need, it could be the same dynamic as the Jimmy Garoppolo trade. If at this moment, they don't need the, 1 or 2 million in savings that releasing D4 right now would net them, and the 49ers will just wait until a point in this offseason or next season where they actually do need that cap space. So that could be the answer. I haven't been able to get much intel on this, but again, right now, if the 49ers aren't planning on an imminent signing, they don't technically need that money, right? It's like they're driving right now. They're not yet at the restaurant. And at the restaurant, they're going to have to bust open the credit card or the debit card, and they're going to have to pay for their meal. But if they're not quite there yet, they don't need that money in their account yet. It could still take some time to transfer over. That's the only answer I can come up with. And if you're buying time, if you find it necessary to buy time, maybe you believe there's a 2% chance that D Ford can give you something moving forward. But based on the way that Kyle Shanahan is talking, saying, I don't expect anything from him. I expect him to be released. He didn't say exactly those words, but it was pretty close to that. Based on how the 49ers are talking, that's not the case. So that remains a bit of a mystery to me. Do you think they make any subsequent moves once they trade Jimmy outside of signing Debo and Bosa, of course? I think they could sign Debo and Bosa before a Debo Samuel trade. They have about $5 million in space right now. There might be other reworks going on to make even more room, but I expect both the Debo and the Bosa deals to be backloaded to take advantage of the fact that the NFL's salary cap is expected to explode with the new media deals come 2023. So you keep those cap hits small here this season, and I think if you're the 49ers, you can execute those deals with Jimmy Garoppolo still on the roster. As far as subsequent moves go, I think that the $24.2 million the 49ers will potentially free up through Jimmy Garoppolo in this 2022 season on these 2022 books will be best served at potential in-season acquisitions. Look at last season. The LA Rams made an in-season trade for Von Miller. The Rams did not have enough money to pay Von Miller on the salary cap, so they got Denver to pay most of Von Miller's contract. Say that the 49ers start off hot in 2022 and they want to bulk up that roster before the trade deadline with, another defensive lineman, a cornerback, whatever, you name it. And they make a big trade and they have to inherit a big salary. Well, the Rams got lucky last year that the Broncos were in position to where they said, we'll eat part of Von Miller's salary as long as you give us these draft picks. It's not always going to be that easy. A team that's trading a player to you probably won't want to eat some of his salary because they probably want to get rid of it. So it will serve the 49ers well if they do have an extra $24.2 million to work with over the course of the season. And always remember, if they trade Jimmy Garoppolo and that money is freed up, even if they don't use all of it, the unused space will carry over into 2023 where it can help pay for Debo and Bosa extensions once the cap hits of those deals, which will presumably be backloaded, increase moving forward. What's my take on Brandon Ayuk dropping numerous passes in OTAs. I didn't think his drop issues were that bad. If off the top of my head, I remember maybe 2. But God, I can't even speak to that one with certainty. All I know is that OTAs, especially for veterans, are a chance to hone the craft. They're working on routes. They're working on, maybe even doing something a little bit different technically. Pads aren't even on yet. Let's wait till training camp and then wait till the games. Brandon Ayuk was on a nice trajectory for the 49ers, so I don't think that's anything to really worry about. Nice. Good morning. That's dobre rano. That means good morning in Czech to start this one. Another QB needing team is Seattle. Is there any way that you could see the 49ers trading to Seattle? Would they require more from Seattle and make a trade to a rival? Yes. I think yes to both questions. I do see the 49ers potentially trading to anybody if the price is right. But the right price from a team like Seattle would be much higher than it would be from anyone else because they are in division and Jimmy Garoppolo could take some secrets over to Seattle. I don't think you'd want that either. So, don't rule anything out, but in the case of an in-division trade of a quarterback, you can sure bet that it would cost a whole hell of a lot of money. Exactly right here. Why would the 49ers help Seattle? You'd only help Seattle if Seattle gave you enough in return to help you. And that would be a whole hell of a lot. A whole hell of a lot. So that's why that's so unlikely. The 49ers, if they keep Jimmy as a backup, his contract doesn't expire until after the season. Jen York already said it. Well, York was talking after the trade up to draft Trey Lance in 2021, saying that if Lance isn't ready for 2022, the 49ers theoretically have 2 years of runway and Garoppolo could again be the starter. Garoppolo as a backup, that's a little bit of a different dynamic and a different situation that I don't think Jed was exactly talking about. Now, having depth in the quarterback room, that's absolutely something the 49ers can still try to maintain for many reasons. A trade market could develop and materialize after week 1, so you keep Garoppolo on the 53-man roster. And B, hey, something could happen to Lance too. I haven't addressed this, but if Trey Lance tweaks an ankle during training camp, Trey Lance hurt something during training camp, you'd sure be happy to still have Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster, which is why depth is important at all positions and why it's even more important probably at the QB position. But the issue is that maintaining depth at the QB position is so much more expensive than maintaining it elsewhere because quarterbacks are worth so much money on the market. And you could presumably also get a trade return for a quarterback. So there's the opportunity cost of not trading Garoppolo. However, if there is no opportunity cost of not trading Garoppolo because the trade market never materializes, then yes, the 49ers can think of keeping him. And then yes, maybe there is a competition in training camp. The thing is, we're still so far away from that. And the 49ers want Lance to be their starter. They want it bad. They want Trey to go and grab that opportunity. And B, they want to save some of this money for some of the potential in-season maneuvers. So we can only look at what the likeliest possible option is. And then we could talk about all these other, contingent possibilities, wild contingent possibilities of the 49ers keeping Garoppolo and Lance. But again, until stuff actually develops and materializes, until the clear path toward a situation and setup like that is there, it's just a lot of hot air. And we just don't want to sit around blowing hot air. If Jimmy's still on this roster and he gets in the game, I'm done with Kyle Shanahan of this front offense. This is Trey's team, says Niner by Nature 88. Well, I mean, that's your prerogative. But this is the franchise that did, again, keep two quarterbacks through much controversy throughout a lot of time back in the 80s and 90s. And people aren't upset about depth at other positions, like running back, wide receiver, offensive line. So being upset about depth at quarterback, unless it's costing the team from doing something else, to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And at this moment, it's not costing the 49ers. We can revisit this discussion if and when Garoppolo makes the 53-man roster. And we could talk about the finances. We could talk about who the 49ers might have restructured. We can talk about how Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo looked like in training camp. I mean, there's going to be a whole lot more data with which to discuss these decisions. But I would just advise against making blanket statements on June 27th, because we already know from experience how much stuff can change as time continues. Young and Joe ain't Jimmy and Trey. In some ways, no, they're not. But in the most important, relevant way? Yes, they are. You have two quarterbacks on the left, Steve Young and Joe Montana, both quarterbacks who are capable of starting football games. And you have two quarterbacks on the right, Jimmy and Trey, two quarterbacks who are capable of starting football games. So on both sides, you have potential quarterback depth. And when you build a roster, you build it with potential quarterback depth being a primary ingredient of that roster. It's as simple as that. Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance don't need to make it into the Hall of Fame in order for them to be considered valuable quarterback depth that the 49ers will think really hard about before jettisoning, right? So they're not going to let go of that depth that Jimmy Garoppolo currently provides at the position unless they get something in return that makes it worth doing such an operation. You don't bleed talent for no reason. So nobody's saying that the Garoppolo-Lance dynamic is a mirror of the Montana-Young dynamic. But people are saying that quarterback depth, having two of these guys, carries value in this league. It did so in the 1980s with Bill Walsh, and it clearly does so with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch here in 2022. When is Jimmy's physical? As soon as he's healthy, I think he could take a physical. So they're anticipating that he's going to start throwing late June, early July. It's going to be coming up sometime soon. Jimmy will have a loaded team in Cleveland. Funny stuff. Hey, it could happen. We don't know. Hey, if you're just coming in, like the video, subscribe to the channel. While we wait here for a few more questions to come in, we'll talk a little bit about tight end U. Let's open up my article here from the other day. I'm still in Nashville, where I'll be here for the remainder of the offseason with my fiance, Margot, who's out at work right now. So I was present for Tight End U last week. Article is up on The Athletic. I'm going to make the page big here, share the screen for you, because we have more viewers than we did last week. So maybe some of you took that week off. But we can talk about what was a really, really fun event to attend. There you go. George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Dallas Clark, Tight End U, and a distinctive unity. I wrote 2,000 words. I was one of the only reporters at Tight End U. It was one of the coolest events I'd been to. About 90 NFL guys there. The QBs were there as well. No Trey Lance. He had a schedule conflict, but you had Josh Allen. You had Zach Wilson. You had CJ Beathard. Obviously, you had Kittle. I talked to Travis Kelce. I talked to Dallas Clark, who's been retired for nearly 10 years. This is the piece. Go to the chat section. Check it out. I think you could still get onto The Athletic for $1 a month. And you could read about Tight End U, about Dallas Clark out there with George Kittle. It was just so cool. They're the three QBs, Allen, Beathard, Zach Wilson. Then I had a whole video for you about the experience. Interviewed George Kittle there. You could see on the screen. That was a fun chat with George. And obviously then you had all the on-field work that happened after that. Heavy on the George Kittle coverage, heavy on some of the coverage of breakaway data, which you see here. Those are some of their employees. There's Travis Kelce. Also got to talk to him. It was really fun, and obviously spearheaded by a 49er star and George Kittle. So check out the article on Tight End U. It's the only thing of its kind that you're going to see here on the internet. And obviously be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, because I also had a lot of video coverage from Tight End U. All right, a few more questions about Garoppolo, and then we will continue on with our days. Mr. Corey always comes on and wants me to pay for everybody's lunch. When the channel hits 100,000 subscribers, I will pay for a lot of people's lunch. But we're like 15,000 right now, so I'm not in position to pay for people's lunch. But yes, I will have some Nashville grub here moving forward. What if Jimmy's content and comfortable being the backup and takes a pay cut? Well, that would be great. I think the 49ers would welcome that. Now, what kind of pay cut are we talking? Well, if he's paid backup money, that'd be what, 10 million? Maybe give him 10 million, but 20 with incentives, or his original deal, like up to his original deal and incentives. In case he does beat Trey Lance out. I don't think the 49ers would mind Trey Lance going through an actual rigorous competition at training camp. They are not averse to iron sharpening iron. So if Garoppolo is just happy to be there and wants to compete, he comes and says that, well, yeah, then the 49ers can go back and say, wow, This guy's willing to do that. Okay, well, that saves us a lot of money, keeps our options open at the quarterback position, and then we'll move with that. But again, all these questions are speculation because we don't know what exactly is going to come to the table. And I would assume that Jimmy Garoppolo would not offer that moving forward. Like Sunshine said, no way will he do that. He just said he wants it resolved ASAP. What would keeping Jimmy do to the locker room? How do you see that playing out among the team? Well, last year it helped the locker room. They all like Jimmy Garoppolo. Even Trey liked Jimmy Garoppolo. You know, football at the end of the day, this is a meritocracy. These guys, you know, you got a bunch of alpha males in the locker room competing. The 49ers have tried their very best to bring in quality men, good guys in there to maintain that cohesion within the locker room. Probably the strongest indicator that the 49ers have built a healthy culture is the fact that they went through hell and back through a complete shitstorm in 2020. 6-10 finish. Everybody got hurt. COVID following a devastating Super Bowl loss. And they came back in 2021, started 3-5, but still somehow managed to pull together to make it all the way to the NFC title game. You don't do that without a strong, cohesive locker room. And Jimmy Garoppolo was a part of that locker room. So I don't view him as some kind of grenade or some kind of bomb that would, you know, set off the locker room and make things, you know, unmanageable. That's already been proven to not be the case. Now, yeah, people will argue, well, now if he comes back, this should be Trey Lance's team. Again, I'll go back to meritocracy. If this is Trey Lance's team and Jimmy Garoppolo is still on it, Trey Lance will prove that during training camp. His teammates will fall in line because they'll see that the better man won the competition in training camp. And Jimmy Garoppolo will take a pay cut, do whatever he needs to do to stay on the roster if that's what he wants, and he'll be the backup. That all resolves itself on the football field. The thing about Twitter is that people think that stuff has to resolve itself via social media flame wars that players don't even read through, you know, YouTube rants and this and that. But no, we could sit back and wait. We don't need the clicks right now. You know, like we could say this is the dead period of the offseason. Jimmy Garoppolo stays on the roster. Well, we'll see how the 49ers deal with that when the time comes. Because when the time comes, if they do have to deal with that, a lot of other stuff will have happened theoretically to make that a lot more palatable situation. The top of which would be Trey Lance actually proving to his teammates and earning the starting spot through training camp. And I think that's something he's already really far on his way to doing right now if Kyle Shanahan hasn't decided it yet. So if the team buys into Trey Lance as the leader, as the starting quarterback, having Jimmy Garoppolo around won't, you know, hurt anything. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo has proven to be a good teammate. And if, you know, he wants to be a backup, he'll be a backup. Simple as that. I don't think that's what he wants. I think Jimmy would rather be a starter somewhere else. And I think that's why, I mean, that's why this is playing out the way that it is. And if he does get healthy, which we expect here in the next couple of weeks, I think that, you know, some kind of movement is likely to materialize at some point. Well, I think that everybody would be happier for it. Trey Lance started the quarterback, starter for the 49ers at quarterback. Trey Lance is the starter for the 49ers at quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo working elsewhere. All right, guys, good stuff today. Thanks for all the good questions. We are coming up on a clean bill of health for Jimmy Garoppolo. I did cover tight end U extensively last week, so go ahead and check out that article. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. I have a lot more content. I'm going to go quicker videos through different position groups coming up. Maybe another one coming today, and then more coming this week. So I look forward to talking to you all. It's lunchtime here in Nashville, so I got to go eat. Thank you again. Sub to the channel. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a great Monday. Hope this helped break up that first work day of the week.